Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Denton. It is vampirism with a host of damned souls of telepaths.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hello, everybody. This is Irene and Mark, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm here with... Forgot who you are.
Who am I? Who are you with?
Forgot.
Come on, say my name.
I forgot again. Mark Johnson.
Heisenberg.
I nearly called you Stephen or Andy just then. Sorry.
Yeah, we've only been
Mark
working
Johnson,
together for
my co-host. That's who you are.
Yeah, we've only been working together about a decade now, but it's understandable.
Is it that long?
Somebody of your age, it's obvious you're going to start forgetting things.
If I've been working with you that long, Mark, no wonder my brains are scrambled. Honest to God, has it been 10 years?
You know what?
Well, it must be.
It's getting close to it.
Because we were on Unknown Origins radio together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been about almost 10 years.
Oh my gosh, time for me to retire.
Yep. Put you out the pasture.
Hand over the reins. Get out of it. Yep. Okay, then. How are you?
Oh, fine. Just another day here in paradise.
Oh, God, doesn't it seem like one day just rolls into the next? You've got day, night. And that's it, isn't it? Can't do anything. Do you know, besides forgetting your name, which I do apologise for, I really do, but I normally have it written up somewhere. Sorry, I'm waffling. But besides that, I forget what day it is half the time. I have to keep asking Alexa, what day is it?
Yep. It's, this is a very unusual situation we're all in. And I don't quite agree with, I had my little rant last week.
Yes, you let off steam, didn't you,
yes.
boy?
And, it's made me take a step back and think of things. It's like, I don't know what the right thing is anymore. I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I mean, I
don't think anyone knows.
No. I still have my tinfoil hat firmly on my head. I still have my suspicions on a lot of this stuff. But, in the end, it's what we're dealing with, and I can only look at it as one day it'll be over with.
Yeah. Well, one way or the other. Yeah, yep. True.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what else has been going on? Anything else? Have I missed anything?
Not really. They're over here. Some states are starting to open up, back up again. They're starting to allow some businesses, except my state, in New Jersey. My governor decided, hey, let's have another 30-day lockdown. Even New York is opening things up, and but New Jersey, nope, keep it shut down for another 30 days.
Well, England's they're opening up as well, slowly. They're allowing people to go out in their cars and drive and everything to wherever they want, beauty spots and things. But Wales is panicking because they're frightened or they're worried that the English will come into Wales, and we're still on lockdown here in Wales. Oh, by the way, everyone, I'm English living in Wales. So, a bit of a confusion otherwise.
And the Welsh don't like the English.
Oh no. That's another story, isn't it? But The Welsh are worried that the English will come in, they will have their days out on the Brecon Beacons and spread more germs everywhere, which could well happen, and I don't blame them for this. I really don't blame them. So anybody that's going to be travelling to Wales from England, beware, because the police are out. They're looking to spot, they pick you up by your number plates for a start, and they are fining people. Whether they're telling them to go back home, go back across the border, but if they don't do that, then they will get fined.
Well, there's so many ridiculous contradictions going on over here,
But that must be happening to you, though, because if you're locked down in New Jersey, what's the state nearest to you that is coming out of lockdown?
New York. New York, which is more highly populated.
So they can travel into New Jersey.
Well, you know what? We can travel back and forth. I mean, there's no restriction on travel. It's just the businesses are all closed. You know, and
you've got to stay local to your home.
Well, you know what? I can go out for a drive and they can't say squat about it. If I'm in my car, it's none of their damn business where I'm going or what I'm doing. You know, it's
they just pull you over here.
Well, yeah, and that's part of the problem is that they are like arresting like mothers who take their kids to the park. And the mothers get arrested for being outside with their kids in the park, and yet the jails.
It's not that bad.
No,
it's not like that, Mark. They always explain you shouldn't be doing this. Now go back home. If you are a repeat offender, then they will find you.
Irene, no, they have it on video. They have video of multiple people.
Don't take no notice of videos. Listen, that was all drug raids. What they've been doing is they've been hitting the drug lords over here. Very, very heavy. Mm. And they're just ramming people's doors down and everything because there's been so much drugs. Since this has been going on, the drug side of it has gone sky high. But people, they take these videos where they're doing a raid on a house which has got drugs or something or other, then they put all different words to it all. But they're drug raids. Yeah,
well, that's not what's happening here.
Mm.
No,
I wouldn't listen to what goes on YouTube half the time.
No, I'm watching the regular news. The regular news has it. There's this salon owner in Texas who kept open, defied the close order, and when they hauled her into court, you know, the judge asked her, you know, what was she thinking? She goes, well, I'm thinking of feeding my family. I'm thinking of my employees being able to feed their families. You know, we're practicing all safe protection, but you know what? We need to survive. So what? Go home and stay on unemployment, which is running out? Or, you know,
everyone's on furlough here. You know, even self-employed people, companies and everything. If you've got a small company, you're getting so many £1,000 out of the government.
Yeah, well,
they're paying everybody.
They're trying to do some of that here, but they're running out of money. You know, or people can't get the unemployment benefits because it's so overwhelmed. And yet what they're also doing is they're arresting people who are defying the order, throwing them in jail, like this woman in the salon. And yet the jails are releasing criminals, real criminals, out of jail because of the COVID-19 getting in the jails. That
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
Still. No, it doesn't. But, you know, the furlough over here has just come to an end and they've extended it now to October. But instead of paying 80% of everybody's wages through the government are going to pay half of that, and they expect the companies that employ these people to pay the other half for the next 4 months. Which I think is fair enough. You know, it's been costing the country God knows how many billion a week. And the government have been doing it for the last couple of months. So now that's the new idea. The company pays half the furlough money and the government pay the other half. So the employee still gets their 80% of their wages.
No, that's good. Again, this is it's going to take a while for us to get out of this. And I just hope the economy doesn't crash so badly that we can't recover.
Well, I tell you what, this is driving me absolutely crazy. There's not many jobs left in the garden for my old man to do, you know. He's built a pergola, or whatever it is. Pagoda. Yeah. And he's planted the grapevines so that they go over it next year.
Maybe he can help your neighbor
done the greenhouse.
Maybe you can help your neighbor finish his wall.
Oh, frig the neighbor. Everyone will get to hear about my neighbor one day, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
After the court case.
Yeah.
Anyway. Right, so should we get on with the show?
I think we should get on with the show. Enough of our bitching and complaining.
Yeah, well, we're always bitching and flaming. But I have to explain, I'll be sitting back on this one tonight because I've got a headache that is absolutely so painful. It's unbelievable.
Well, take your tablets. Take a step back. You'll still be listening. If you have any comments you want to make, just jump on in. But we'll go from here. So why don't we go ahead and we'll introduce our guest. Our guest tonight is an author, UFO researcher, paranormal researcher. He's written several books and dozens of stories, a lot dealing with UFOs. And his latest book, Onboard UFO Encounters, which just came out this year, which I read cover to cover. I loved it. So want to welcome Preston Dennett to the program. How are you tonight, Preston?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks.
Hello, Preston.
Thanks for coming on. Now, but before we get into the meat and potatoes of your books, especially your latest book, can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in this subject and what got you started into doing all this research into UFOs?
Yeah, sure. I grew up very skeptical. I'm the fifth of 6 children. 3 older brothers, older sister, and a younger sister. And I thought we were all skeptical. You know, I was pretty scientifically minded and did not believe in life after death or UFOs, certainly, or ghosts or anything. And heard a report on the news. This was November 1986 about a UFO sighting over Alaska. There was a Japanese commercial airliner. And the pilot said this UFO followed him. And turned out it was caught on radar. Of course, other people in the plane saw it. There were ground witnesses. They tracked his plane for almost an hour, even though they tried to, make diversionary turns to shake it off. It still followed them. Now, none of this was in the news. They just kind of mentioned it, laughed about it nervously, and moved on. But I thought, wow, this pilot just threw his career away. He must be on drugs. What is going on? Is he hallucinating? It was just interesting enough for me to start asking people about it, what they thought of this crazy pilot. And it turned out, and I got a real shock here, a good 25% of the people I knew had really close encounters. I mean, like missing time, face-to-face encounters with gray ETs, chasing UFOs down the road. All of them had witnesses to their encounters. It wasn't just one person saying this.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, this was shocking. It was not really great news as far as I was concerned.
So that was eye-opening for you then, Preston.
Yeah. I kind of had to reevaluate everything. I'm like, what? This wasn't taught in schools. What's going on here? Is Earth being invaded by aliens?
Yeah.
Because I knew these, I knew my brother wasn't lying. He chased this saucer down the road in his car. And he had friends. Yeah. Had 2 friends with him, too. He tells me the story. He's like, it was right ahead of us. It was metallic. It had colored lights, a dome on top. It was darting around.
He must have been brave, because if it was me and Mark, we'd be going the other way.
Speak for yourself. I wouldn't be going the other way.
That's crumbs, Mark. If you saw this UFO going to Mars, you did, didn't you? But for me, if I saw a UFO going down the road, I would I'd do a U-turn in the middle of the motorway. I would.
Well, see, like I
I'll
said,
be round and off.
not me. They don't scare me at all. I mean, I'm fascinated with the subject. And what I saw, just to summarize it for you, Preston, was a couple years ago, I saw a string of orange lights flying over where I live here in New Jersey, but they're UFOs only in that they're unidentified. They could have been a fleet of drones, but I couldn't hear any noise. I was stuck in traffic, so I really couldn't get out and watch them. And they flew in a northwest position about 40 miles an hour, and I just watched, and they were flying in this long, drawn-out formation, about 15 to 20 of them. And I watched them for a few minutes as I was driving down this road, but there was too much traffic. No place to pull over, so I really couldn't watch them for that long. And I just can't, I don't know what they are. I mean, the closest I could say is maybe they were drones, but usually drones don't have bright orangish red lights and nothing else. Usually they have the red and green lights, or red and yellow, the different types of flight lights that required by most drones. And it was very, very odd, but I can't sit here and tell you it was, extraterrestrial UFOs by any means.
Well, that's a lot of drones to be wandering around, clustered together.
Yeah, and going in a straight line and flying for miles. I mean, usually drones don't do that, and, they don't have the battery power for that. Most drones last only about 20 minutes, even on the best of batteries.
They can't go very fast either.
No. So I don't know what they were. So very strange, but that's my one and only, I put air quotes, UFO encounter. Now, the one thing I did want to mention before you talked about with your brother chasing UFOs, where you grew up and are still currently living in my old hometown, in my own neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah, I grew up, born and raised in Sylmar. Was there. I was 6 years old when the 71 Sylmar quake hit. I had chickenpox at the time. It's one thing I really remember about that. And then, of course, I was there for the 94 Northridge quake, which, being older, that one really got my attention.
Yeah. Hey, you live here very long. You'll experience an earthquake.
Yes. And LA's they're overdue for another one. It's been over 20 years now.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that. It's always good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't live there anymore, so.
Beware.
But, in talking about your book, the new one, Onboard UFO Encounters, when I was reading it, the one story that really stuck out to me was the one story set right there in the valley, around Lakeview Terrace and the Hanson Dam.
Right.
And I used to have family that lived up in Tujunga. And before they completed the 210 freeway, going out that way, we would take the back roads, and we'd always go by Lakeview Terrace and go by Hanson Dam. So I was very familiar with that area. So it was kind of fun to read that part of your book.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty active area. Tujunga Canyon has got a number of reports. A very famous abduction case came from that area. And Ramon's case is by far, I would say, the most extensive in the book, or certainly one of them. And his encounters cover the entire gamut of, UFO experiences, certainly that I've heard.
And you know what? What's ironic is I've always been fascinated with UFOs and ghosts and you name it since I was a kid, and yet I've never seen anything all the time I was living there in the valley. Of course, we have an hour. A little over an hour away was Edwards Air Force Base, and growing up we always heard the sonic booms as they were testing and breaking the sound barrier. And I was even there for the first space shuttle landing and for a couple of the other space shuttle landings. So, we always had the military presence not too far away, but I can't say as I ever saw anything that I would say was unusual in the night sky.
It definitely takes seeing to, I think, really let the let sink in how real this phenomena is. For Ramon, it happened when he was 6 years old, and he's had sightings ever since. His whole family has. They have them regularly. It seems they're attracted to certain people and are showing themselves off on purpose, I think.
Well, it seems like from other UFO experiencers, alien experiencers that we've interviewed over the years, they seem to follow family lines and family genetics.
Absolutely true. That's true in Ramon's case. His parents have had encounters, his grandparents. Probably goes back farther than that, but several people I've talked to can trace it back a number of generations. And for that matter, in at least a few of the cases, the ETs, I'll call them ETs, I think that's what we're dealing with here, have told the witnesses directly that they have been following their genetic lines since, they told one lady since biblical times.
Wow.
Yeah, that shocked her.
That's a long time to be stalking someone, isn't it? Let's face it.
Well, it seems like, and in a lot of these cases that, or people, you talk to people like Whitley Strieber, or some of the other, more well-known cases, there is a lot of genetic manipulation that seems to be going on, and going from family lines down for years. I mean, it's been postulated that we were basically created. The human race is a hybrid species based on a number of different extraterrestrial races, kind of like, thrown into a blender, a little bit of mixing around here and there until we have what today is modern man with all of our unique characteristics, faults, you name it. But it's also, to me, it also explains why we look and seem so different from every other life form on this planet. It's like we don't belong here. If you look at how our bodies are built, how we are compared to the rest of the animal kingdom, it's just, there's something off with the human race.
Right. Yeah, there's a best-selling book out right now, Humans Are Not From Earth, or something like that, by, I think it's Ellis Silver, which raises some of these exact things. And I remember before I got involved in UFO research, I'd certainly heard of, occupants. And I thought, well, this is too Star Trek for me. They're obviously lying. These are all humanoids. I was kind of expecting aliens to have tentacles or something, but turns out all the reports I get, almost universally, of people who claim to have, had contact, describe some humanoid, and sometimes human-looking. And so I'm looking through all these accounts. I'm like, well, all right, we got people out there coming from we don't know where, presumably other star systems, who look just like us. That raises serious questions about human origins, to say the least.
Because, we always think of, well, why would they look like us? They're from another planet. It's like, well, maybe that's because they had a hand in making us. We look like them because we came from them, which is why we're the only real upright walking hairless hominids on the planet.
This is Lynette's case in the book kind of speaks directly to this, because she's had a lot of missing pregnancies, a lot of genetic manipulation. They're very interested in her genetics, had at least 4 missing pregnancies, has seen her hybrid children, and the ETs have talked a lot to her, been very communicative. Normally they were pretty tight-lipped, but no, they've told her all kinds of stuff. And they told her that, yes, they have been manipulating human genetics for centuries. Long time. They told her that not only are they messing around with human DNA, that they're also doing it with animals. And specifically, they told her, this is real interesting, they said that they are, how did they put it, using genetics to enhance the emotional intelligence of dogs and cats so that they can relate better emotionally to humans.
Oh my God. Oh dear. Gertie, ignore that one. Gertie is my British bulldog. She's mental.
I'm telling you, man. You look at how complex. Dogs can feel guilt. Cats know what they're doing. You can't fool me.
Yeah.
Cats know what they're doing. They just don't give a damn.
Right? So that I thought was really interesting. In Lynette's case, they told her other things. Like another thing was that they said that the accounts we have of angels in our biblical times and throughout were really them. Mm-hmm. They said that there's a lot of that people might go missing on our planet, and in some cases it's being done by them for, quote, the universal good. So I don't know if you've heard about all these people. There's a lot of research.
Yeah.
Well, I know David Paulides has his series of books, Missing 411. Steph Young has her series of books about, people going missing, especially in the national parks areas. There's so many people who go missing in the national park, never to be seen or heard from again. Or there's strange cases of people disappearing and coming back or being found days later, like the Todd Seas case.
I know it. Yep.
Even Travis Walton, he was gone for 5 days before he was returned and came back with his story. And it's kind of funny. I'm actually very friendly with two of the gentlemen who were in the truck with Travis, Steve Pierce and John Goulet. And what's funny is not everybody in that truck got along. And they have different, they sometimes have different versions of parts of the story of what happened. But they still all experienced something very, very strange. And what's unique about that is I know that Steve Pierce, he was the youngest member of the truck crew, and he was portrayed by the same actor who played Elliot in E.T. in the movie. But he has also been having his own UFO experiences most of his life and is still having them today.
Wow. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me that people have different versions of a UFO event. That's pretty much normal with any event. I mean, if you interview people about a car accident, you'll get some different stories. Mm-hmm. And like one time I was interviewing these 4 kids who saw a UFO come right over their house. It was, there was 2 little ones, this giant craft followed by 2 other little ones and another one, a whole fleet. And this giant craft shined down a beam of light. It was like right over the house. And one guy gave a really great interview. He says, "Oh man, I've always wanted to see a UFO. I saw one earlier," and he described it in detail. And the other guy, it's not giving me a good interview, and I kept questioning him. And finally, he's like, Preston, I'm really sorry, but I was just too scared. I did not want to look at it. I cannot tell you what it looked like. So I definitely get different versions, and it goes beyond that. There was another case I was interviewing a gentleman who had experienced a missing time abduction. There was 4 people there in the car, and one guy, all he remembers is nothing. He doesn't remember anything happening at all. Another guy says, "Oh, it's just a guy on the side of the road with a flashlight." And the other guy, he remembers a UFO actually landing and then getting out of the car and being pulled into it. So all different versions.
Well, I tell you what, I hope that doesn't happen to me. I see a lot of funny things in the sky where I live. I live in the Gwendareth Valley in Wales, and it's UFO highway here. You see a hell of a lot, especially on clear summer days. But they don't want to come near me.
I don't think there's something to be afraid of. I think they're very much like people, like us. Probably nicer than humans.
Well, I think.
But knowing the ones that come near me, they're the ones that want to take me away. For experiments. No way.
Yeah, well, that's a real problem in this field. Abductions.
Yeah.
That's a crime. I don't care where, what country you're from. That's not right.
No.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about that a little bit, because, when the first human gut reaction is, "Oh, I was taken against my will." And, there have been people who saying, "You don't have the right to take people without their permission." And, the aliens usually come back and say, "We have every right." But then when you start looking at some of the work of people like Dr. John Mack and his hypnotic regressions, or Dolores Cannon, and they start doing the regressions and going back, and you start to find out that these people may very well have given permission. In fact, they're actively part of a project or projects that consciously they're not aware of, at least not in the waking state, but either
Right.
on a spiritual level or higher consciousness level, they are aware and actively participate. I mean, even Dr. John Mack, in his 2 books that he wrote, he told several stories that dealt with these beings, or people who remember being these beings in another lifetime, and they agreed to come down for a human experience to participate in what's going on. Of course, now that they're here and they're thinking like a human and they get taken, of course they're like, hey, you can't do this, because there's no memory of it. We just know that we're being taken, experimented on, and we have a serious problem with that. But on a deeper soul level, or deeper, I don't know how you would explain it, that there's more going on than what we can consciously realize.
So they're not taking me, Mark, but they can take you. I give you permission, whoever you are, to take Mark.
You know what? If it gets,
you don't want me, you want him.
If it gets me out of the house,
subject.
If it gets me out of the house and I get to go on a ride, I'll take it.
Yeah, I've heard that, that we've agreed to this pre-life perhaps, and there's at least 2 or 3 cases in the book that the witnesses remember that. They actually have memories of this. And others have been told, yeah, you agreed to this. But I have to tell you, some people I've talked to are like a little bit offended by that. Because they, when you're being anally probed, or, going through some horrific examination, and you have no memory of agreeing to it,
have you
no difference.
Have you ever spoken with Whitley Strieber?
Have I? Excuse me. What?
Have you ever had a chance to talk with Whitley Strieber?
Oh yeah, many times. Yeah.
We've interviewed him many times, and I remember when Communion first came out, and I read Communion, and I read almost all of his books based on the subject at that time. And it's interesting to see how his opinion over the years changes to where he is now. In his latest book, which just came out earlier this year, and we talked with him about how his attitudes have really changed about the whole process. Now, he was, of course, in the early days in the 80s when he first started consciously remembering this stuff, and the abductions and the, anal probes, and he was made a laughingstock by the media of that, and a joke, and it really hurt him deeply. He considered it rape. And yet now, 30-something years later, he has this deep relationship with these intelligences that he still doesn't fully understand. He admits right up front. He refuses. He doesn't call them aliens. That's why he uses the term visitors. He still doesn't know 100% who or what they are. But they've been involved in his life since childhood. That they've been involved in his family's life for a very long time. They work with him. Lately, he had an implant that he found 20-something years ago. He had an implant in behind his ear. They tried to remove it, and they really couldn't. But it's only been in recent years, after his wife died, that the implant seems to have turned on and has given him it's almost like a Wikipedia, in that it's given him access to certain information. And he has a relationship going on with these beings, even though still not fully understanding who or what they are. He does, and this is one of the concepts that he first brought up that I really had a trouble dealing with and understanding, is that they seem to have an active role on a spiritual level with us on after death, because he's met people that who have died. He has met during his encounters. They were dead, and yet there they were. And which, for me, and a lot of the other things that I've read over the years, a lot of the other interviews people I've interviewed, seems to suggest that they're operating on a not quite physical level, that a lot of them, some may be physical purely, some might be interdimensional, some might be operating on a level way above the physical plane, which is why they struggle to work and communicate with us here. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I've certainly thought a lot about it because I've researched ghosts and, had a bunch of out-of-body experiences myself. Really looked into this, and I think the evidence that we've got, theory that fits best by far, is extraterrestrials. And the reason I say that is because these are solid objects. They're appearing on radar. They've been filmed and photographed. They leave landing traces. They cause medical effects. People are being taken on board these craft. They're being healed. I've got 300 documented cases. We've had implants removed. They're very unusual. And ultimately, the ultimate evidence we don't have our hands on officially, but it would be crash retrievals and the alien bodies. We have enough whistleblower accounts to say, I think, pretty conclusively that we do have, the Roswell craft and the Aztec crash and the Kecksburg craft and the Paradise Valley, and I could go on and on. There's a lot of these UFO crashes. Mm-hmm. And if we really have these ships, aren't all bets off? Are we flying these things around? That's what the reports that are coming out are saying. Well, so at least some of these are ETs.
Well, some of these, again, they are ET. They are extraterrestrial. Again, I also think that what we're dealing with is different types of levels, different races, and they all have different agendas. I know that Dr. Dave, I believe what was his name? Dave Jacobs. He used to be on Art Bell's show a lot. He always looked at the aliens were not good. They were something to be feared. They were here with bad intentions. Everything I've seen is, and from what I've read and talked with other experiencers, is you get all kinds, just like you do with people. Some can be benevolent, good. Some are indifferent, and some can have malevolent intentions.
Exactly. Their behavior falls under pretty much the same umbrella as human behavior. And, looking at the 15 cases in the book, there's a few that are pretty harrowing. They're not friendly. There's a few that are very friendly. Most kind of fall in between there. Mm-hmm. There's one guy who feels like, no, these are not ETs. These are demonic. This is I don't know what it is, but it's not ETs. That's his opinion. Another guy feels these are angelic beings. Another guy says, I don't think these are ETs. I think it's an intelligence that wears different masks and puts on, sort of a display. Whereas most people in the book do feel it's ETs. So I don't know.
Well, it's been shown that they can project screen memories, fake memories. Was it Mike, what's his name? Mike Cleland, who wrote his book Messengers about owl encounters and how owls figure predominantly in a lot of the UFO experiences and encounters. And even Whitley Strieber had mentioned owls being used as like a screen memory. Oh, I saw an owl. What do you think of when you see an owl? A short thing with big eyes. And right. It's not until they get under hypnotic regression that they realize it wasn't an owl. People have told stories about seeing an owl 3 feet tall standing in the middle of the road. I don't know about any
just like that. Yeah,
I don't know of any 3-foot owls in nature, but people have. Again, they seem to have this ability to mess with our minds, give us false screen memories, or erase our experiences altogether. And they're also not above manipulation. You know, they will do things in a certain way in order to manipulate people into certain responses. They can control people, make them docile. Some people have reported, you know, an insane amount of fear that almost seems like it was being manufactured. Rather than it being them natural. Of course, a lot of people are scared. If you wake up in an alien craft and there's a bunch of bug-eyed aliens standing around you, yeah, you're going to be scared. But yet even sometimes the terror that some people feel, it almost feels like it's being used artificially induced to act as some kind of a control.
There was a case just like that that I investigated in another book. A guy was walking up to a UFO that was in the forest in his backyard, and he reached this point where he hit a barrier. That fear just swept over him. He stepped back, the fear was gone. Stepped forward, just this dread that he could not move forward. So, yeah, I still think, you know, people talk about interdimensional beings. Well, yeah, perhaps they've mastered that. We ourselves are interdimensional. So it doesn't, I don't think, preclude the extraterrestrial theory to have these guys, you know, mastering movement on the other side, perhaps, or dealing with spirits even. As far as time travelers, it's a theory I still can't, you know, put to rest, because there's a lot of cases you can march out where these ETs, the Greys, have said, we are from your future. We are your children. One day you will look like us. We are you. This sort of thing. So, I think our relationship to them is probably a lot closer than we realize. But the idea of extraterrestrials is a logical idea that I can't get away from, because some of these other theories, you know, like the Jacques Vallée theory, is a little bit anthropocentric, saying that this intelligence is sort of all about us. And history has shown us, you know, that we're not the center of the universe. So I tend to think the extraterrestrial theory is probably most accurate, but probably not the whole story.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of experiencers who talk in their, you know, communication with these beings, talking about different star systems. You have the Pleiadians, you have the Sirians, you know, coming from the Orions, all sorts of different star systems that we can see from the night sky. And yet, in a lot of cases, people who seem to be aboard these craft, when they're under hypnotic regression and how they talk about things, it seems like they're in an altered state of reality. Not exactly on board, like physically floated out a window, you're on a craft and whatnot. Yeah, that happens. But at other times, it feels like they are in a different state of consciousness or a different reality. And if you start looking at dimensions as different vibrations, like radio frequencies, you can be listening down the dial at, 93.7 and then go all the way up to 105.5, two different radio stations playing two different things. They're both broadcasting at the same time, but you can only tune in and hear one of those at a time, but they're still both present. And I think that's the same way with some of these different types of, I don't know if dimensions is the right word, but frequencies and these different types, levels of reality that people experience when dealing with some of these creatures. Now, one of the things you had previously mentioned about how your brother chased a UFO, and before you didn't believe in anything like an afterlife or whatnot, but then you started having out-of-body experiences. So how did you get from being a complete non-believer, agnostic, or however you wanted to term yourself, to being a believer in not only, being able to do out-of-body experiences, but, believing in these UFOs? And have you ever had a UFO encounter yourself?
That's a big question. Well, yeah, I have seen UFOs a number of times, only after I started investigating this stuff. And it was, becoming from skeptic to, UFO researcher and ghost hunter and out-of-body stuff. was a journey for sure. I mean, I had to completely dismantle everything I thought I knew about the world. And it started with UFOs. But I have to tell you, it was around the same time that I was dealing with the death of my mother in 1984. And so I'm researching UFOs in 1986. And at the same time, I'm having these dreams where my mom's coming into my room. I'm awake. I think I'm awake. And she's saying, I'm fine. And I'm like, you're dead. What's going on? And I knew on some level it was her. I just knew it. But I couldn't reconcile the fact that there is no life after death, so it couldn't be. And I started getting interested in dreams and lucid dreaming and out-of-body exploring. I picked up a book on that and started doing the exercises. Now, it turns out, now, years later, interviewing all these people who've had UFO experiences, this is a familiar story. A lot of them have an explosion of paranormal stuff happen around them at the same time. So having an abduction and then starting to have out-of-body experiences or dreams that come true or channeling or becoming a healer, this is pretty much the norm. So it came hand in hand, and how it kind of happened was I was interviewing the initial witnesses within my family, friends, and coworkers. One of them was Sylvia. She was a pilot, a scuba diver, very level-headed person, and was describing this egg-shaped object that floated over her house. And I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, my friend was there. I'm like, oh my gosh, another witness. Because I kind of assumed people were alone when they were having UFO sightings. That was completely false. And she's like, I have a ghost in the house. I'm like, you do? Well, I don't. All right. And she describes this haunting. And I'm like, oh. And so I started to have to look into all these different paranormal aspects and piece it together, because it was clear that in some of these cases, all this stuff was related.
Yep. And, I ran into a few years back with my own paranormal group, because I've always been interested in UFOs, and I kind of wanted to branch out and start researching other phenomena other than just ghosts, and ran into a lot of resistance in my own group that people say, no, UFOs, there's no such thing, that's BS, or there's no such thing as Bigfoot or whatever. It's like, but you believe in ghosts. So what makes it so, beyond your comprehension that there couldn't be other types of phenomenon going on out there? And just, you get people in those camps that they'll believe in one thing, but they won't believe in another. And especially it's mind-boggling to them that in a lot of cases, people are experiencing multiple types of phenomenon. With the UFO experience, they're dealing with, ghost and poltergeist types of phenomenon happening around them.
Hey, I was dealing with this one haunting case, which was an apartment in Van Nuys along Kester Avenue. It was a retirement building. A lot of people, passing away, and terribly haunted. These two ladies had moved in and were having knocking noises, apparitions, cold spots. They'd bring in their friends would see it. Full color apparitions. I interviewed their neighbor who also had problems. I called up the building manager, and she's like, oh my God. And she starts listing all these things that happened. And they had this incredible UFO experience in the apartment building. They came rushing out one night. They're thinking, oh, something else is happening paranormal. No, it was a UFO. And it was right over the apartment building, this huge string of lights, very low. They said it made a low buzzing noise. Very strange lights. They gave kind of a classic description, and this object zooms away really fast. And the question in my mind is, okay, here we have a haunting, which, by the way, moved to the most intense level. These apparitions, these spirits, tried to possess them, and it did actually, enter into one of these ladies. It was a terrible experience. She hated it, and they ended up moving out over it. But yeah, I'm like, what the heck is this UFO doing hovering over a demonic haunting or, a poltergeist haunting? There's something going on here.
Well, I've mentioned this on the show before. I had a long-term paranormal case that we were investigating here in Bloomingdale, New Jersey. It involved two houses across the street from each other that were experiencing activity. We went back over, a number of years and investigating it. And, we realized real quickly that whatever was there was part of the land, not any particular house. In fact, more than likely, there was hints that more houses in the neighborhood were having activity. We could only just get these two homeowners to talk. And this was one of those cases that started to change my point of view of paranormal activity in general, kind of getting away from just ghosts or, the spirits of people who have died who are still hanging around. I mean, I don't believe in quote-unquote demons per se, but I do believe that there are other types of entities out there. And we started in just researching, coming up with the conclusion that what we were dealing with was something that was attached to the land and was probably there first. Because people had only been living there since the late 1800s. There was a farm, and then they built in the 20s, they built these houses, and Native Americans lived there before. And in one lady's backyard, we, unfortunately, the TV show Paranormal State came in, and the only good thing about that entire experience is they brought in a ground-penetrating radar team in this lady's backyard, and they found a buried structure, a circular structure, which almost seemed to have an arrow going through it, with pointing north. It had an arrow tip at one point of the circle, and the bottom of the circle fanned out like a feather. But there were also what the radar operator called areas of interest, these white spots around it, that he's pretty sure are burials. And unfortunately, the homeowner was too frightened to ever dig to try to see what was under there, and then they eventually moved away. So still don't know what's under there. But it was something that I think went back to Native American times. It predated the white settlers building stuff there. And I think that there was something in the woods, something around the area that was coming into the homes, and it was very mischievous. It started off with normal types of activity and started getting more intense and a little more malicious as time went on. My one client was starting to get oppressed. Her personality would change being in the house. I watched it happen. She would be like flipping out and a total wreck in the house. She'd walk outside and she was perfectly fine. And then when she moved away, she felt fine and hasn't had a problem ever since. But it felt like whatever was there was attached to the land.
Yeah, I think that's true in a lot of cases. It's very interesting with spirits. And even with UFOs, there's certain areas that are just major hotspots. Well, I'm not sure why.
Part of the story that I was leading up to a point and I got off on a tangent. She called me one morning, I should say. She had an experience in the middle of the night that scared her to death. And she goes, "Mark, you wouldn't believe what I saw, but I can't tell you. You think I'm crazy." And I'm going, "You can tell me. What did you see?" And she was so afraid that I was going to judge her, thinking she was out of her mind. And I go, "No, tell me." She finally admitted that she had woken up, and by her dresser, she saw this like misty, like a white figure standing by her dresser, like with its back to her. And she said she must have made a sound because it turned to look at her. And she goes, "Mark, you're not going to believe this, but..." And pardon my language here. She goes, "It looked like a fucking alien." She said it had the, the big eyes and the gray, looking like a tall gray standing there and looked at her. Pardon?
I said, I remember that.
Yeah, it scared the crap out of her, and she went under the covers, and then when she looked back, it was gone. But that was the only time in all of her experiences that she ever encountered something that looked like that.
Yeah, a mixed motif case, kind of. These are the really curious cases where ghosts and UFOs intersect, and it turns up. It's not super common, and it's the same sort of situation with Bigfoot. Another subject I did not want to look into. I knew it was a can of worms, and I just resisted it until I got this case from Canyon Country. A radiologist had a UFO land in his backyard. I believe it was the UFO that came first, and then the next day it was Bigfoot, right in the same place. His dogs were going crazy. He felt like he was in telepathic contact with it. That turns out in a number of Bigfoot accounts.
Oh, Mark.
So I'm like, I ended up getting another case very similar where a lady was having contact with ETs and then had this major Bigfoot encounter. Which it intersects perfectly sometimes.
Well, that has been talked about in a lot of different types, even in the Skinwalker Ranch case, which I'm sure you're familiar with. In the original book Hunt for the Skinwalker, they mentioned how not only with all the UFO activity, they had Bigfoot activity. They witnessed using an infrared binoculars one night, a portal open and a Bigfoot-type creature crawl out and then run into the woods. And Irene, you made a comment there thinking about your own experience.
Yeah. But mine were shimmery, weren't they? To give you the Reader's Digest version of Irene's story, on 2 occasions because she says she sees UFOs in her valley all the time. And on 2 occasions, about 5 years apart, she took her dogs out in the backyard to do their business, and she witnessed 2 figures that looked like they were cloaked like the Predator in the Predator movies. Outlines.
Wow.
You just see the outline of them shimmering.
Mm-hmm. And
I was very, very brave, Preston. I put my hand up at them, palm up, said, "Don't go there. Don't go there." Yeah. But my dogs were absolutely terrified.
Yep. Now, in hindsight, and in us discussing it, she said the outline of these creatures reminded her of a Bigfoot in their shape and size. And there is tales in her part of Wales of what we've labeled the Trey Moor, which is the Welsh Bigfoot.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
And she's also heard on some fall nights, she'll hear these howls and screams coming in from down out of the hills nearby.
Right. It's very strange. The Topanga Canyon area is a very well-known UFO hotspot, and it's got an enormous amount of haunting activity. There's been like a religious miracle there. There's some cryptozoological creatures. I hesitate to lump all these phenomenon together because I don't think abductions are
I believe there's a connection.
Yeah,
I do believe there's a connection. This house is well haunted.
So my theory, honestly, is that there's some sort of perhaps vortex or portal, or the area between the worlds is, the veil between the worlds.
Mm-hmm. Ley lines.
Something, perhaps the ability to manifest some electromagnetic energy. Something is going on, but I don't think, religious miracles are UFOs. I don't think near-death experiences are abductions. I don't think all ghosts are demons.
No, but what I think they are, they're all indicative of showing that our version or our concept of reality is extremely limited. It's like trying to explain the color red to a blind person. And even our perceptions with sight and sound. I mean, with sight, we only see such a small little sliver of the, of the light spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, that goes way in opposite directions between the infrared and ultraviolet, into X-rays and gamma rays, but we can only see this one little sliver that we call visible light. Same thing with hearing. Most animals have great hearing compared to us. We can't hear nearly as good as most animals. They can hear things and sense things. I also think that animals are a lot more psychic than we generally tend to be, because they are able to sense when something comes into the room that we're not aware of. The energy changes. You have a dog start growling at something in the corner and there's nothing there. Well, what is it sensing that's in that corner?
I think this is why it behooves investigators, UFO investigators, to really, not ignore all these different paranormal aspects, because you're not going to solve any mysteries by throwing away evidence. And yet you've got some very nuts and bolts researchers out there who just don't look into this kind of stuff. I do think we'll definitely have more progress if we look at this more holistically.
Well, what's ticking me off is the fact that you're mentioning all of these locations, which I'd go to all the time or all around me, and I never knew any of this stuff when I was living there. I mean, I moved here 20 years ago. And all the time, I mean, I worked at Six Flags Magic Mountain for 7 years. From high school onward, I had friends out there. I lived in Canyon Country for a little while. Lived in the Valley. I've lived in Van Nuys, Reseda, Sylmar. Just all over the place. And yet, I had no idea any of this was going on. And now I'm pissed off, because if I would have known, the only thing that I really had happen. And I might have told this story before, is the very first real paranormal research I did was in my teens when I was still in high school. My brother and I, we'd watched this show, a documentary on Channel 13, back at the time, KCOP. And it was called, I think it was The Amazing World of Psychic Phenomena, narrated by Aaron Burr, Ironside and Perry Mason. And in one segment of this documentary, it showed this guy going around to cemeteries with a big reel-to-reel tape recorder and tape recording graves. And at one out of so many graves, he would get a voice or a response. Well, we looked at that and go, oh, that's bitchin', let's go do it. So we grabbed our cassette recorder and we went over, and in Sylmar they have what's known as the Pioneer Cemetery. It's all fenced off, but it was a cemetery going back from the 1800s, so it's an historic site. I think in later years they have it padlocked to keep people out of there because it was being vandalized. But we were still able to get in there, and we went with our tape recorder and started taping graves, and we play it back, and this is broad daylight. It's in the afternoon. We weren't brave enough to go at night. But still, in one spot, on one grave, we got not one, but two EVPs. Very, very clear. And what was interesting about this particular grave, the headstone was missing, but it had a cement slab over the top of the grave, which was unusual in that cemetery. Excuse me. And the first recording we got, we'd hit the record button, we'd walk several feet away, stand there quietly, let it record about 10 minutes. We didn't even know to ask questions at that time. And this is back before they even coined the term EVP. And we'd come back and we played it back, and we're listening to it, and all of a sudden we hear a whispered voice. So we crank up the volume and we put our ears closer and we listen, and to our amazement, it's a woman's voice, and she whispers, "I'm dead, help me."
Wow.
And we were like, oh my God, this one friend of ours who was with us, he was about to crap his pants and was going to run. And me being me, sitting there going, oh crap, let's see if we can get another one. Because it didn't scare me. I was more excited about it. So same grave, we hit the record button, walked away, came back, played it back, and right after I hit the record button and you hear my footsteps walk away, this woman's voice, clear as day, very loud, like she spoke right into the microphone, she goes, "It isn't finished." And it was strange because even it was a Class A EVP with tone, but it had this echoey quality, like it was almost like in an enclosed room, but very, very clear. And that was my first EVP and paranormal encounter doing research. But then again, after that, I kind of put it away for about another 10 or 15 years before I moved out here to New Jersey and lived in a house that had activity. And then I, got into it full time at that point doing research.
Yeah, I know about EVPs, and it's really an effective method sometimes. And it's great when you get a really clear one, because a lot of them can be interpreted, I think, in different ways. Mm-hmm. But it's something that's fascinating because ghosts, and as far, for that matter, ETs, can affect electromagnetic instruments. It's interesting. Another fascinating thing about spirits is they'll be seen in mirrors. You can see them in the reflection, but not in real life. So what's going on here? I really feel like, we're progressing as far as using technology to communicate with ghosts. There's all these little electronic and EMF detectors that ghost hunters are using. I feel like if we really throw some money and attention at this, we could develop an instrument which is basically an electronic medium, and we'll be able to communicate with ghosts, much in the manner of a Ouija board, which brings up all the problems we have with Ouija boards. It's just, who are you talking to, and what, I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed who messed around with the Ouija board and regretted it, because they ended up having a real bad haunting.
Well, a lot of times is people don't know what they're doing. Let's face it. You have Parker Brothers marketing it as a board game for ages 8 and up. Yeah, you can be 20. You have to be 21 in order to buy a beer, but hey, you can only be 8 years old to summon a demon. And that's the problem, is nobody. They're selling something that they don't understand, and people need to understand it has nothing to do with the board. The board itself is not evil. It's like any other tool. It's how you use it, and it's that person's intent, what they do with it. And when people who don't know any better, they go, hey, let's try to talk to a spirit. So they all sit around, they have that intent, let's contact somebody, and usually it's whoever will talk. Well, you get somebody who's not so nice. It's like opening your front door to a stranger, and then that stranger turns out to be really creepy and you don't want anything to do with it. So you put the board away, but you haven't closed the door. So the door's wide open. Oh, hey, they just walk right on in. And then you're stuck with a lot of problems. So people don't know. They open the door, they don't know how to close it, because they've never been trained or taught on how to use it.
Right. I think with the Ouija board, what happens is, there's a lot of people who are earthbound spirits, and they're generally, lower level in terms of consciousness. They may have addiction problems, or just be outright evil. So it's a real sort of gamble, I think, when you start using a Ouija board, if you're going to reach a higher level spirit. I don't know.
And that's the thing, a Ouija board, and now I've gone through some types of spiritual training. I've went through some shamanic practitioner training. You don't use a Ouija board to try to contact something on high. Or higher vibration. There are other ways of doing that, and a lot safer, and you'll have more genuine experiences. Most people are using a Ouija board are looking for that cheap thrill. And then they wind up, you're right, talking to the lowest common denominator, the white trash hillbilly of the spiritual world, who wants to come in and mess around, or something that can be really particularly nasty. Or I liken to be like a parasite. They feed off of negative energy and fear. So the more trouble they stir up, the more people are afraid, the more they feed.
Right. I went to see a physical medium once. That was really interesting. She did what's known as table tipping. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. I first watched them do it. It was a small table, a card table. I thought, well, they're probably just tipping it with their fingers. It wasn't a super heavy table. Finally, it was my turn. And, I'm a researcher. I've got my compass. I've got all cameras. I'm like going full on with this. And the table's like moving around, different for each spirit. And finally, I'm like, all right, everyone take your hands off except for the medium. Because I want to make sure that, this is not a hoax. I knew it wasn't, but because you can kind of tell. So it's just me and her, and boom, the table goes up. I'm like, all right, just use one hand, Donna. Her name was Donna, and see if that works. And boom, it went up. I'm like, all right, just use one finger. Just put your little finger on the table. And boom, right up on its side. And I actually was able to get it going by myself at one point, so I know it's real. It was a really fascinating display of physical mediumship, but she talked about, her professional protocols. She did a meditation before and afterwards, with white light and all of this sort of stuff, because she hadn't done it previously and had problems. Yep. She did have a haunting. She had a fire breakout. She had a weird sound clicking around. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, one time we had left. I went and visited her repeatedly. We had a session, and I believe I was alone in the car. Yeah, I was driving up through the valley here, up along Topanga Canyon Boulevard, about to enter into the canyon, and some force hit my car, and I nearly lost control. It was pretty scary there for just a split second. But people are like, "Oh, you hit an oil slick or something." I'm like, "Well, no, I don't think so," because something hit the car, and it caused me to swirl all over the place.
Wow.
And I feel like it was connected to that.
Now, again, we're mostly talking about the UFOs and whatever, but, there's still some of the other topics you mentioned that I find very fascinating, like the out-of-body experience. And, that's actually something I've tried to do, mostly failed. I have trouble doing it, but I've had 2 experiences in my life, and one was in high school, where I thought it was a dream, but I know now it wasn't. This was no dream. I mean, I remember it 40 years later. You don't just remember a dream 40 years later. But in this dream, vision, whatever you want to call it, I found it was the middle of the night. I found myself out in my backyard, and it was as bright as day, but everything had this green tint, almost like looking through night vision. Right. And in this dream, whatever, I knew I was in spirit form. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh, this is cool. This is what it's like to be a ghost. This is great." And there was someone else with me who was helping me and sharing the experience with me. And I have no idea who they were. Don't remember anything much more beyond those moments of knowing that I was in the backyard and out of body. And when I woke up, my whole body just felt electrified, like tingly. And walking around for the next 3 days, I felt like if I would have, jumped, I could have risen 10 feet into the air. I just felt that light in my body until everything returned to normal. And then nothing like that happened again for many, many years until I moved here to New Jersey, and I was actively trying to do some techniques for doing an out-of-body experience, and then I had something happen that I'm still not quite sure if it was a real out-of-body experience or not, but it was because it felt like it was mostly playing out in my head. But I felt like I was back in my old house where I grew up in, and I was walking around. Everything looked the same as it did back then. But I felt like I was in spirit form. I tried to go out the front door, but yet there was something outside, like a pack of wild dogs or whatever. It was like a warning saying I couldn't go outside. And so then I got an idea, and I walked over and I looked at myself. And we had a big mirror in our dining room, so I walked over and I looked at myself in the mirror. And what I saw staring back at me was the weirdest, strangest image of, it was kind of like me in a humanoid shape, but it was very distorted and white and whatnot. It was, if I want to compare it to something, if you ever saw that poster for that Johnny Depp movie, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, how his head is all twisted and weird, that's kind of how I looked, looking in the mirror. So wow. It was, and those are the only 2 experiences that I could say that I could actually feel like I had some kind of an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like an out-of-body experience. I've had a number of them, and that weird glow that you described is something I've certainly seen. I've got all the books on this phenomena, too, and that's pretty common. Sounds like you had a spirit guide with you. That's also fairly common. And that feeling you describe of, being electric afterwards. Mm-hmm. Man, you should have tried to levitate, because you probably could have. This is this whole secret to levitation. levitation is a real phenomenon. I've written a book on it. It's cross-cultural. There's accounts stretching back 2,000 years to the present day. It's absolutely true. And it's definitely connected to astral travel.
You know, I used to, and I don't, it doesn't happen hardly, it hasn't happened in a while, but I used to fly in my dreams. And let me tell you, I freaking love flying. Because, or it's like being able to like jump up high and then jump up over the roof of my house and like hover up there, or like floating down a hallway, like I'm swimming down the hallway, but I'm floating above the ground. Or even times where I feel like I'm way up in the sky and I've seen UFOs in my dreams up in the sky. But those feelings, you know, which I realized were probably forms of astral traveling, not really dreams. But I haven't had that happen in a while.
Yeah, flying dreams are usually half remembered out-of-body experiences. It's, you know, anyone can do it. We are actually having out-of-body experiences every night. So it's really just a matter of remembering and bringing this all into our consciousness. But it's as safe as sleeping. It's a natural human talent. And the things you can do are incredible. For me, I started doing the exercises and it worked. I had my first one after about, 3-4 weeks of really buckling down and relaxing and meditating and doing all the visualizations and stuff like this. And boom, I popped out of my body one night, thought for sure I had died. I was horrified, was really scared, and dove back in. It was a very strange feeling. And I woke up and I'm like, wow, I actually did it. It actually inspired me, so I got really excited and had another one shortly later. Was super excited, ran up to the mirror, actually, and I could not see my own reflection. Mirrors turn up a lot in these experiences because it's sort of your body double, and you'll have these sort of themes of a double. Because you actually have multiple bodies. It's not just the astral body. There's higher bodies, which you'll experience as you go on with this. But man, oh man, it's so much fun. It took me a long time to learn how to stay out more than a couple of seconds, to move, to see, to verify that this wasn't a dream. I finally found a way to do that I would try to move objects, couldn't do it, try to visit people, and they never see me. Finally, I was able to, go to a certain location and then go there later physically. I'm like, yep, this is what I saw. I know this is not a dream. But ultimately, you get pulled to the other side, and you start to visit your deceased loved ones, go to healing temples, learn about your past lives, visit spirit guides. Oh, it's just so much fun.
Well, you did write a book on about out-of-body experience. I admit I picked it up and I've started reading it. I'd like to try to do some practicing on that and see if I could get it to happen again.
Hey, I hope so. I wish everyone would do it. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Preston, have you ever tried telling your subconscious before you go to sleep that you're going to remember?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the techniques. Every night, because we're all think we're falling unconscious, but we're not.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's a very effective technique. Probably the best technique is to tell yourself throughout the day, once every hour or as often as possible, am I out of body right now? Could this possibly be a dream?
I give an instruction to my subconscious mind.
Yeah, all these things, you want to kind of reach your subconscious mind. This method works because if you do it enough, you'll do it while you're sleeping. And it's not enough to just ask. You have to kind of look around and say, is there anything weird going on here? Or test reality by trying to fly, jump up, or walk through a wall or something.
Can I change the subject for a moment?
Yeah, of course.
I'd like to ask a question. You've obviously talked to people that have channeled ETs.
Yes.
Have you ever come across anybody that, when channeling an ET, comes out with very highly intelligent information that person would not know or really hasn't got the intelligence to have come out with it? in real life?
Yeah, certainly. And I've probably read more about those kind of cases than personally investigated. But certainly, yeah. One lady I interviewed had all kinds of experiences. She actually showed me a UFO. I couldn't believe it. Twice. She was able to channel and would just give these really profoundly spiritual messages that was and using words that were just not in her vocabulary. You know, she's not a well-read person, or wasn't at the time.
Yeah.
It's clearly someone else talking. And
when this person is getting information from these other beings, are they in an altered state of like sleep?
I asked her about that. She's like, sometimes she's dimly aware of her surroundings. Yeah. And she's kind of watching from through a window. Other times she's off out of body, just doing other stuff. Yeah. And sometimes she has no awareness of it at all. So kind of comes and goes for her. She said sometimes she could sort of see through the background, through a gauzy curtain, and see what was going on in the room, but knew it wasn't her speaking. She was standing back.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Well, funny you bring that up, because I've been rereading, and again, this is kind of a controversial topic because of who it involves, and I know a lot of people have their own opinions. Are you familiar with Stan Romanek?
Yes, I've talked to him.
Okay. Now, a lot of people have written him off in the UFO community because of, well, two things. Because he did something during an interview once where he threw a pen and tried to claim it was UFOs, but it was clearly his hand moving it. So everybody right away said, he's a fraud, he's a fake, and whatnot. And then, of course, he got busted for kiddie porn on his computer and went to prison. Now, in that time, before that happened, personally, and you know what, this is my opinion, and I say this only because I knew Stan and Lisa. I've talked with them, met them several times, went to their home, and what I know of them and what they were dealing with, and there was a lot that never came out in the press, I totally believe Stan was framed to shut him up. And he's been effectively shut up. He's been a pariah. Nobody will touch him with a 10-foot pole now. But yet during the time that he had his books out, he was also doing hypnotic regressions with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who is a very famous hypnotherapist who works with UFO cases, UFO abductees. And I got to witness one of these regressions that they did with Stan a few years before all the trouble happened. A friend of mine recorded it. And I edited the video for the team. Now, we've never really made this video public, but I still have a copy of it. In fact, I rewatched it again over the weekend because something about it, something keeps drawing me back into this, especially the series of channeling sessions he had where this ET they called Grandpa as a nickname. Grandpa Gray is what they call him, coming through and talking and saying things. And if anybody who knows Stan, and again, I'm not putting the guy down by any means, but he did not have the intelligence level to be able to come up with a lot of the things that he came up with, especially the mathematical equations that he came up with, which, were given to mathematicians and physicists that it blew their minds and they had trouble understanding it. All they knew it had to deal with certain types of propulsion. And the fact that people who were around the Romanes, both Stan and Lisa Romanek, during those times would see UFOs and see and have all these strange things experienced. So it wasn't just listening to one person tell a story that, hey, maybe they were faking it, maybe they were lying about it. There was so much evidence all around them and what was happening to them. And so I watched this video of this hypnotic regression talking with this gray alien, and there was a lot of pretty famous UFO and researchers in the room when this happened, and they were asking questions at the time. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of really what my point is. The point is that I believe that there was an intelligence coming through that was not Stan faking it. Sometimes the answers were frustrating because there was a lot of information it wouldn't give, or would just say it's not important. And then I've had my own experiences talking with someone who would sometimes go into a trance state and somebody else would come through. And I'd start having a conversation with somebody who was not physically alive. And we came across some very interesting, really high concept information that way. Whether whatever we were talking to you could consider extraterrestrial, or were they spirit guides or something. One time they used a term that I've never heard before, Agarians. And I tried to do some research on that, and I thought I found some research on it once, but when I recently tried to go back and look for it, I couldn't find anything online about it. I don't know if you've ever heard that term.
No, can't say that I have. But yeah, Stan Romanek, I do support his case. I think that, even if you were to take him completely out of it, like you say, there's an enormous number of people around him who you'd also have to call liars. There's just far too many. It's kind of like the Ed Walters case. Whenever a case generates an enormous amount of controversy, I'm attracted to it because there's a reason for it. The Billy Meyer case, people are like, no, he's a fake. I'm like, I don't think so. Because there's far, far too many witnesses. This is not to say that, I believe everything that's, going on in all these cases. But yeah, I talked to Stan Romanek. I talked to his wife. I know about his healing case. His case, I think, is almost specifically designed to have an enormous amount of evidence to convince people. It seems.
If you read his books, there's the one I was reading recently. It's called The Orion Regressions, which, in his other books, he would take snippets of some of these regressions and, have them in the books. But in this book, there were 5 regression sessions that he typed out the entire thing, word for word. So it went through and some of it's kind of repetitive, but showing exactly the different conversations and that they were having with this entity that was channeling through Stan. And I've heard about that healing case. In fact, he showed me this pillow that he had his hands on, and his hands burned right through the pillow. And he still had the pillow. He brought it out and showed me, and it had the burn marks in the shape of a hand on the pillow. And I do believe that most of what they experienced was true. I think all the harassment they encountered was true. He was beaten up a couple of times. One time he was beaten up and he got some slight brain damage because of it. There's a lot of things out there that I was told, and I won't say anything about it because I was asked not to. But I definitely think that they were targeted, and I know Lisa and Stan have divorced, and she's moved on because she would only say it was amicable. They both agreed to it, and she's on with her life, and she won't talk about that part of her life anymore. And their books are out of print. Their publisher, Mark Leone, I know he's a really nice guy, but he kind of disowned them after that whole thing with Stan happened. So, it's a lot of controversy. And the only reason I still stick with it you're right, because of all the evidence and the multiple witnesses and the things that happened that really couldn't be explained, that go far beyond one guy trying to fake something. And then,
the alien selfie picture, remember that?
Yep.
There's some great evidence there, and I think that's why he was attacked. And we've seen that with other researchers. I mean, I believe that happened to Wendell Stevens as well.
The only thing that gets me, and Irene and I were actually having a conversation about this the other day, is that, you know, in all of these cases, especially during the regression sessions, they say how they're using Stan, and there was a group of people surrounding Stan, and the whole idea was to get this message out, to spread the awareness, to help bring on this awakening that's supposed to be coming, you know, to get more and more people to be open and believe in this sort of thing. And they were working with Stan, and then all of a sudden this thing happens, and he winds up getting railroaded, goes to jail. You know, they steal his computer, hold on to it for 8 months, and then they come back and said, oh yeah, we found kiddie porn on it. Like, yeah, like I believe you. Tell me that wasn't planted on there. You hold it for 8 months before you can find anything and then charge him with it. But, you know, not to mention all the other things. There was one time, you know, even Mark Leone was showing me, and was in one of Stan's books, where they found a listening device in Stan's house. And they showed it to a guy who knew, like, spy technology and listening devices. And the guy saw it, and he got afraid. He said, this is more advanced than anything I've ever seen. So Mark Leone told Stan, send it to me. Don't tell me how you're going to do it. Just go somewhere and ship it to me. Don't tell me what carrier. Don't tell me where you're going. Do it. Pick something at random. Send it to me. So they found a FedEx place one. They put it in a box. They shipped it to him. It went overnight, and when Mark Leone got it the next day, he opened up the box. A couple of rocks fell out, and there was a note in there that said, "We don't think so."
Man, yeah, I've had people who've had their hypnosis sessions stolen. One guy interviewed in New York. He wrote down all of his experiences, put it on the mantle in an envelope, and that was stolen. He called the police, and the police were not helpful. They're like, it's just a letter. You know, like, no, it's more than that. You know, this was valuable. Not at all unusual. I've had problems myself. Early on in my research, there was no internet. Everything was through the mail. And I was sending out books and manuscripts and articles, and a lot of it came back opened. I'm like, what is going on? I even showed my sister. I'm like, you open my mailbox. Tell me what you find. Because I was very prolific, you know, trying to get this stuff out, and had stuff coming in every day. And she opened the mailbox, and sure enough, there was a manila envelope torn open. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly open with my research. I'm not sure what's going on, but phone problems, internet problems, pretty sure that the government is closely watching all of this, and for that matter, the ETs too.
We've had some experiences doing this radio show sometimes when we have interviewed people, especially UFO experiencers, ET experiencers. One of the ones that really gets me, and it wasn't exactly an ET experience, but we had interviewed, the last two times we interviewed Whitley Strieber. This was after his wife, Anne, had passed. And we interviewed him last year on his book, The Afterlife Connection. And it talked about how his wife, Anne, who's been a part of him, you know, was there with him every step of the way from communion onward, and she ran his website, she answered all the correspondence, she was very much involved with everything with him, and then she had her strokes, and then she eventually passed away. And shortly afterwards, he started getting different sorts of communication with her. And it turned into this whole thing where he was having a relationship, and she was sitting there helping him in different ways. He was connecting with her while he was doing transcendental meditation. He was getting messages from friends. And so we're talking to him, and during the show, It was at the end of the show. We just said goodbye to him. A couple of things happened during the show where we kept hearing something strange happening. There was like a strange noise. We thought we caught a voice in the background on the recording. We weren't quite sure. But at the very end of the show, we just said goodbye to him and signed off, and Irene and I were talking. Now, I like I said, I've known Irene for 10 years. I know how she talks. I know, I know her extremely well. And she never really knew much about Whitley Strieber. She's not so much into the UFO thing as much as I am. And I've read most of Whitley's books. I know him know his background very well. And when at one point during our interview, towards the end, he was reading something and he was telling it with such dramatic flair. It was like, a performance piece. And it was really intriguing to listen to, but I'm sitting there going, wow, he's really being dramatic reading this. And at the end, when he was gone off the show, Irene and I are talking, and I started commenting about, how overly dramatic he was being reading this piece. And she goes, well, that's just Whitley being Whitley. And then we kind of stopped, and I go, what? Because she never calls him that. She never called him Whitley. Never said anything like that. It came so far out of left field. And I remember reading something like that before, that Anne had said something very similar. So I called Whitley up right afterwards, and I told him what happened, and he started laughing, and he said, yeah, sounds like Anne came through.
Wow.
And then the second time we had him on, which was about a month and a half ago, talking about his new book in the Communion series, for a couple of days beforehand, Irene kept calling him Whit. Yeah, well, when we talk to Whit, we'll do this with Whit. And it's like, Irene doesn't do this kind of thing. It's not her, the way she talks. It's not the way she refers to people. She's calling him by a nickname. And when we got him on the air and we started talking to him about it again, that was a nickname that Anne used with him all the time. So Irene was picking up on her, and Anne was coming through in very subtle ways during these two conversations we were having with Whitley.
Hey, not the least bit surprised. When spirits see an opportunity to get a message across, they take it. And if someone's even remotely sensitive, they'll start, planting these sort of things.
I think you've got him confused about who I am and what I am, Mark. I'm a bit different to the normal person. Let's put it that way. I'm not just a radio broadcaster.
Yeah, Irene's had her own experiences through life. But, she normally when these things come and try to talk to her or give her information or whatever, she just tells them to F off. Leave her alone.
Yeah.
She can't be bothered.
Send him Among the Spirits. Let him read that.
Okay.
Then they know who I am.
Okay. So
all right.
I mean a grape.
Yeah.
I have these grapes here to keep Pickle's parrot quiet, you see, but I scoff them all. He's gone to sleep now. No, if you send him the book, then he might understand, Mark. I'm not normal.
Well, I knew that.
No, I'm very abnormal.
So,
do you want a copy of that book?
Yeah, we'll send you a PDF copy, so you can take a look at it. It's her life story, and things that she has dealt with all of her life, and ghosts and spirits being primarily a part of it. But the UFO experience, the creatures she saw in her backyard once, that's also part of the book. And there's also some other different
slips and God knows what else.
Yep.
Interesting.
And again, it goes back to how all of these phenomena seem like they're different. Totally separate. You talk to most people, they'll compartmentalize different phenomena, but yet I think that they are all interconnected, but only interconnected in a way that shows that our view of reality is is not quite the way it is. We're like trained from childhood to believe that this is the way the world is, and to ignore anything that seems out of the ordinary. I think we're in a generation right now that's a lot, thanks to, modern television and the internet and whatnot, we're more open to all these different concepts more than at any other time, I think, in our history. But yet it's still a lot of people don't believe, or they still, don't understand how a lot of this phenomenon is connected in one way or another.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, for centuries, we've evolved a lot over the past 100 years. Religious thought really kind of dominated, and science has come in and sort of made a lot of progress. But I don't think science quite has the right answer either. It's very mechanistic and materialistic. And if you look into it, I mean, there are other dimensions. And so I think we're finally learning how to piece all of this together. We're definitely making huge progress. But there's really no such thing as the paranormal,
no.
Honestly, or supernatural. It's just our own lack of understanding.
Exactly. The problem I have with modern science is that modern science is just as dogmatic as any religion. And if you try to, go against the status quo, if you try to come up with, radical ideas that goes against what everybody has, believed in for a long period of time, even if you got the facts, you get destroyed in peer review and ridiculed and run out on a rail, and because you can't upset the apple cart, especially when it comes to these types of things that will jeopardize religious beliefs, beliefs in the government, beliefs in, the stability of our world. People are be faced with a harsh reality, and so they try to keep the status quo. Modern science, they won't believe anything unless they can bring it into a lab and dissect it and repeat it and put it under a microscope, and then they'll say, yes, this is real. But when you're dealing with something like paranormal phenomenon, which is still slightly beyond our comprehension, we don't understand what causes it or what it's made of. Now we know how it affects our environment. We can measure EMF spikes. We can record EVPs. We can capture anomalies on video or on photographs. Do we understand what it's made up of? What's causing it? No, we're still trying to figure that out. And my analogy is trying to explain radiation to somebody 100 years ago. You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't do anything, but it's there, and, just because we don't understand it now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We have the arrogance thinking that, well, we're in the 21st century. We're at the height of mankind's technology. We're still barely scratching the surface in a lot of ways until they start to acknowledge that, hey, this kind of stuff is real. And, that we need to acknowledge it and take a deeper look into it.
Yeah, I just recently found out that there's really good evidence for giants having lived on Earth. And that's something that really shocked me.
There's, what's his name? I'm kicking myself because I'm having a brain freeze right here. There's a friend of ours we've had on a couple of times, and I edited his first book. He wrote a book called The Ages of the Giants. Damn. He's going to be so mad I'm forgetting his name, but I'm having a brain freeze right now. Where he did a lot of research on the Adena mound culture here in the United States, where the mounds, the Indian mound cultures, where in these mounds were found the bones of giants, and how around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, how the Smithsonian Institution was going up and grabbing up all of these giant bones and remains and then sticking them away in a basement, never to be seen again. Like giants? What giants?
Jason Jarrell.
Jason Jarrell, thank you.
How upsetting. I took a bunch of anthropology classes in college. Not once was this mentioned.
Nope.
And I found all this evidence for. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of newspaper articles. This is all across the world. Very prevalent in the United States.
Well, this is what impressed me most about his book. As I mentioned, I got to edit it for him before he published it. And not only did he do his research and footnoted all sorts of different archaeological books, but he did his research in periodical articles and newspaper accounts going all the way back to the 1800s, early 1900s, of finding giant bones in these burial grounds, in these mounds, being anywhere from 8, 9, 10, 14 feet tall. Well, where did...
Hey.
And this was in newspapers at the time, and yet they were whisked away, and now you try to tell people this now, they'll laugh in your face. It's like, there's no such thing.
Yeah, don't tell... Forbidden Archaeology, remember that book by Michael Cremo?
Yep.
Same sort of thing, batteries and... that are ancient, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that people are very closed-minded and we're missing out. I just interviewed a guy a couple of days ago who saw 10-foot-tall entities during his UFO experience. So the giants doesn't surprise me now as much as when I first heard about them.
There are stories.
Man.
I've heard stories that have come out recently during the war in Afghanistan of troops supposedly encountering these like 10, 12-foot red-haired giants, very aggressive giants in the caves and mountains of Afghanistan, and getting into firefights with them. But, you go into Indian culture. Indian culture has Native American cultures talk about a race of red-haired giant people who were very, very aggressive. They called them cannibalistic, that they had problems with. They wound up killing a lot of them off. There was a story, I think, out of California of the Paiute Indians, cornering a bunch of giants in a cave, and then they lit a fire in the beginning of the cave to smother them all, to kill them off. So
very interesting commonality. Like they all have 6 fingers, or not, but that sort of turns up a lot.
Or a double row of teeth. Yep.
Yeah. Very interesting. It just goes to show how important it is to remain open-minded. And like you say, science has a tendency to become a closed system and not welcome new ideas. Or, we'll flat out deny the evidence and destroy it.
Yep.
Rather than upset the apple cart, which is so ridiculous.
Well,
that's not science.
Which is why, and again, this is a whole nother show. It's like you look at the Bible and how the Bible was put together and what books were left out. And there's a lot of the apocryphal books that were found in the Nag Hammadi Library and the Dead Sea Scrolls that were never made part of the canonical Bible because they were too controversial and had different ideas and different stories. And history has been changed. We're given this sanitized version of history. And also, let's face it, history is written by the winners.
Hey, that's why I'm very careful when I do my research. I am just a channel for these experiencers. This is their story. And when weird things happen that, I've challenged my own belief system, I don't erase it. That's not science.
No.
I try very hard to be objective.
Well, and even when we talk about how some of these different phenomena and how people look at it. Now, I have friends who are Bigfoot researchers, and they've had their own sightings. A friend of mine, Tim Stover, out of Ohio, he had a Bigfoot sighting about 25 years ago when he was sitting up in a tree stand, and he looked down and he saw this creature standing 30, 40 yards away, and he watched it for about a minute and a half before it turned and walked off. And he's been looking for it again ever since. Now, he's one of those people who thinks it's an actual, undiscovered hominid or ape-like creature. Nothing paranormal about it. And yet, he has had some very strange experiences in the woods. One night, he called me up, almost in a panic. He was still out in the woods. He had cell phone signal, and he called me up because he was walking in the woods, and all of a sudden, this ball of light floated right up to him and hovered right in front of his face for about 30 seconds. And I asked him questions about what happened, and he said, I asked him, how did you feel? And he goes, well, you know what, it was strange. When it was hovering there, I wasn't afraid. It was very peaceful. And then it wasn't until he got the idea to reach down to grab his camera, it blinked out in front of his face. That's when he got scared. And he was getting out of there, and he called me up immediately afterwards to tell me about what happened. And, you know, this ball of light, I know a lot of researchers and people have seen these balls of light in areas where there is certain types of high paranormal activity, even UFO activity. There's a lot of balls of light associated with, like, say, around the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Have you watched that new show that's on History? It's on History Channel, on the Skinwalker Ranch. Have you seen any of the episodes on that?
Yeah, I sure have.
You know, it's taken a lot of heat from people just screaming bloody murder of, oh, this is fake, this is scripted, this is this and that. And it's like, you know what? Coming from a film and TV background, I understand how shows are made. But the guys that they have working on this show and some of the experiments and things that they're doing, I believe they're finding some very genuine activity. I think they're also being limited by the structure of being on a television show. But at the same time, this last episode where they did the ground penetrating radar and they found this huge disc-like shape under the ground. And every time they try to dig, somebody gets sick or gets hurt, and they're getting hit with high levels of intense radiation. You know, they had a radiation monitor, and they got hit with a blast of radiation that wasn't lethal, but it could have made them sick. So there's something definitely going on down there. There's also, now, are you familiar with John Edmonds and his ranch in Arizona, the Stardust Ranch?
Yeah, well, I know of it. I'm not super familiar with it, but certainly I've heard of it.
He has been at that ranch about 25 years. We've had him on the show a couple of times. I talk to him once in a while. Now, he's had, ever since he moved into that ranch, extreme negative ET experiences with these grays. He's claimed to have killed some. Usually when he kills them, he says they vanish, although he says if you take the head, they don't vanish. And he's had tissue samples sent off and tested and found that they're not human. But yet the scientist that was working on them mysteriously died. He's had a lot of weird things, harassment at his ranch. He was trying to sell it there for a while just because the activity that they have there is too intense and it's very negative. He and his wife have both been harassed. They've had physical ailments, but other people who have come out and investigated the ranch, they even did an episode of Ghost Adventures, did an episode out there once. And they caught a lot of weird activity in the time that they were there. So wow. It's something about, and it's funny because that ranch is in line, there's a straight line between it and the Skinwalker Ranch, and right in between there's another ranch that I've just started to hear about called the Bradley Ranch, which seems to be another one of these areas of high strangeness that has every type of UFO and paranormal activity you can think of.
Yeah, I think it's Bradshaw.
Bradshaw, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. And speaking of, that the show, the Skinwalker Ranch, I've done a bunch of TV myself. Well, not a bunch, but occasionally, and had some good experiences and some not so good, because definitely there's a certain element of like, oh, do that once more, but this time with feeling.
Yeah.
And was on one show where they're like, all right, here's the questions we want to ask you. I'm like, oh, okay, not unusual. These are the talking points. And they're like, and here's the answers we'd like you to say. I'm like, what? So it was pretty much scripted. And I had another time I was on the news, and I was showing the news crew where a UFO had landed. And the guy walks over and points to a gopher hole. And said, well, is that a landing trace? I'm like, well, no, that's a gopher hole. It landed over here. There's no traces you can see. And he's like, well, would you mind saying that that's a landing trace?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, I mind.
Yeah,
tried to trick me.
I've been interviewed a couple times for TV, and they tried to get me to change my story, and I wouldn't do it, and so of course I didn't wind up on TV on those episodes. Because I'm not going to lie for these pinhead producers who are looking to sensationalize.
I've caught some of these reality shows flat out lying.
Yeah,
other researchers, I'm like, dude.
Well, yeah, I mentioned the Paranormal State episode that we did. I had a lot of problems with what happened in that episode. They definitely misrepresented evidence. They changed things around. They kind of screwed over my clients a bit. And of course, the host of the show was, snorting cocaine in my client's bathroom. So yeah, not a good experience. But we're getting back to, we've got about 5 minutes left, and just want to focus a little bit more on your book, which is Onboard UFO Encounters. And you have, 15 different stories of people who have had encounters going on board UFO craft.
Right. 10 men, 5 women, all across the United States and the world, for that matter. One guy in Netherlands, another guy in England. A guy had an experience in Canada. These are all very extensive encounters. It's very interesting because some of them describe very much some of the same details, that they obviously don't know each other. Like what does it look like inside a UFO? And it's just amazing to see the corroboration.
Yeah, and there's so many stories that I've read of people going on board this craft, on these craft, especially the organic aspect of it, how the walls and the floors and ceilings kind of merge all together. It's all one. And in a lot of cases, people seem to feel like these craft themselves are alive. There's a living energy aspect to this, not just nuts and bolts UFOs. And I think that's one of the areas why I've never really hooked on to MUFON that much, because I think too many of them in MUFON tend to be more of the nuts and bolts type of UFO craft, and I think what we're dealing with goes a lot farther beyond that.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is why it's very important to research all aspects. Whenever I interview someone, I make sure I get their whole history. I want to know are they Republican? Are they Democrat? What kind of education? Is there anything medically weird about them? What kind of phobias do they have? I want to know everything, because I think it all connects.
Now, what do you think was one of the weirdest stories you've ever heard? One that really twisted your brain.
That's a trick question, but one of the weirdest one was what happened to this guy named Paul. That's his real name. He's got an unusual last name, which I didn't put in the book, because his experience was very strange. This took place in Palmdale. He was with a group of teenagers who were just in one of their parents' cabin, and he had disappeared for a couple of hours. Everyone was wondering where he was. He comes back, and he said he came upon a landed UFO. And his friends are like, oh, yeah, sure. But the guy I interviewed, Tony, who was there, knew Paul. And Paul was not the kind of guy to joke about it. And Tony asked him what he saw. And Paul described walking up to this landed UFO. There were these pretty much human-looking figures. They were bald, had large dark eyes, but otherwise looked very much human. And they took him on board. It was a very pleasant experience. They showed him around. They said, we're studying this area. Would you like to come with us? And he's like, permanently? And they're like, yeah, if you want to, we'll take you. And he said, no, I don't want to. And they said, well, we're going to be back here next year on this same day. So think about it. And if you are interested, come back and we'll be here. And long story short, he did. He ended up giving all his stuff away. Tony was really worried about it. He's like, are you going to go with these guys? And Paul's like, I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I'm going to go see. And he drove off there and didn't come back. So Tony, his friends, and Paul's parents went up to the cabin, found his car with the keys in it, but never did find Paul. He's gone.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Not the only case where someone has been permanently abducted, but it's pretty rare.
But can you call that an abduction? Sounds
Right?
like an invitation to me.
Yeah, that's why I don't like the word abduction, which is why I kind of called the book Onboard UFO Encounters, because I think that it's more accurate.
Now, we are coming up here on the end of the show, so where can people find your book Onboard UFO Encounters?
I do have a website. If you Google my name, it should take you right there. The actual address is prestondennett.weebly.com. And yeah, you can contact me through my website, whether you've got a question or a comment or a story you want to share. All my books are on there, excerpts, and you can order them through the website or on Amazon. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Preston, thank you so much for coming on. We definitely could have kept going here, and we're definitely going to have you back, and we'll talk about this and some of your other books some more.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me on the
That would
show.
be a very good idea, Preston.
I got more books coming up, so I'm ready.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be ready for you. Well, thank you again for coming on, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to another edition of the Paranormal UK radio show here on the Paranormal UK radio network. And you all stay safe, stay healthy, and we will catch you next week. Irene, we will talk to you soon.
Okay, bye everyone.